I didn't really expect to be coming on tonight, and I don't know how long I'm going to be here because of the internet connection's not that strong and not that reliable. So if I disappear, that's strong and not that reliable. So if I disappear, that's. As I was saying, things are a little bit dodgy here. I'm also not using the same system I use back home, so sorry about that. Let's just see who's here. Jean is here. Good to see you here. Stephanie will be in about 10-15 minutes. So we're going to talk a little bit about the preliminary hearing dealing with the disappearance that turned out to be the murder of Gannon Stauch, an 11-year-old boy from Colorado Springs. And it turned out that his stepmother, it looks like she may have been involved in the circumstances surrounding her stepson. And if we feared that something terrible has happened, it looks like something has happened that is a lot worse than we could have imagined. It's actually, it's almost, it's kind of Jodi Arias level, kind of dysfunctional, to put it mildly. I just want to greet a couple of you guys. Raymond, Julie, good to see you. Dawny B from the UK. Christine, good to see you. Angel on a mission. Nat Man, Starbright Kush, Lady Drone from Canada. I'm quite tired, so I'm going to try and get through this as fast as I can. I've sort of got up fairly early. I've been running on the beach, so I'm kind of physically quite tired. And it was really a mission, sort of preparing for this live. I sort of worked for over an hour and then lost all the information that I sort of put together. So I'm definitely feeling quite weary. Leslie Bush, hi from Alaska. Sherry Lynn, hi from California. Okay, so I'm just going to go into it. I'm not that surprised that Letecia's actually sitting out on her preliminary hearing. If she sat in on it, you'd actually she would have to have an audience taking in, her responses to some pretty grisly, shocking, terrible evidence. And she probably wanted to deny certain people that, I don't want to call it a pleasure, but that sort of scenario, I guess, is the best word. But if you think about it from the perspective of you're innocent, right? You didn't do something. You've been falsely accused of a crime, and you're not even going to sit in on your own preliminary hearing to hear the charges, the evidence against you. And Letecia's kind of seesawed, gone from the one side to the other in terms of first dismissing her legal counsel and saying, that they're not good enough, or for whatever reason she got rid of them, then declaring herself incompetent, then declaring that she's going to defend herself, which is like saying, I'm very competent, and then not even attending her own preliminary hearing. So it's quite crazy, but in a weird way, all of this craziness, acting crazy and then having the competency hearing, it sort of goes hand in hand. The difference is she was found to be competent twice, whereas Laurie Vallow hasn't been. And so it's quite interesting to compare them. Sigeti Norna, thanks for that. Nat Man, this is heartbreaking, yeah. Dodie Dixon, good evening. Nick and everyone in chat. Timmy is actually right behind there. He's sort of tucked in for the night, so I'm not sure if he's going to make an appearance, but I might try and encourage him to do that. I do, for those who are here who are interested in the Summer Wells case, there are some pretty fascinating intertextualities in this case, especially regarding the timeline, which we'll get to. Someone says, do you ever rest? The reason I've touched on this case is because I wrote a book about it, and it's been quite a long time where we've not heard anything. And so I do think, oh, Bria, good to see you here. So I do feel like I kind of need to address some of the work I did in April last year. That's kind of why I'm attending to it, if I can put it that way. I do want to rest, but I do feel like I need to pay attention to this particular case. So almost 18 months have passed since I wrote Boy Interrupted, the murder of Gannon Stauch. That narrative was based on a 33-page leaked affidavit. Now, for the first time, new information from the autopsy. We've never heard about the autopsy and what was released from that. And so that is why we're sort of going into this. Not good enough or for whatever. Okay, so then declaring herself. Quite weird. As soon as I move my mouse, it activates the speakers. Quite odd. Okay. So, you know, sometimes when we deal with certain cases, it takes so long. We get some information and then months and months and months go by before you get more information. And so, you know, someone might say, well, you know, why don't you just enjoy your holiday? I spent a lot of time researching this case, and so it is quite important, the information that has come out today. So where are we? Well, the preliminary hearing is being held in the El Paso County Court in Colorado Springs, which is just 2 hours drive from where the Morphew preliminary hearing was held in Salida, right? So just kind of around the corner. Interestingly, Letecia is kind of an oddball. We're going to find out quite a lot of things about her that is pretty weird. Like I say, she's tried to have herself declared incompetent twice. And what is kind of being examined here is she the prototypical kind of classical wicked stepmother? Like is she, you know, is she bad, but kind of in that stepmother role, or not? And as I say, it seems a bit odd that she didn't, you know, attend her own preliminary hearing. Everyone's been waiting for it. Certainly the people interested in this case, but not her. Well, it looks like even the fire is dying behind me. Lucky's definitely not on my side tonight. Okay, so time intertextualities with the Summer Wells case. On January the 27th last year, at about 5 minutes to 7, now compare this to the Summer Wells case. January 27, obviously this happened kind of in winter, but the 911 call came at 5 minutes to 7 or 6:55. That's like about half an hour, 40 minutes later than in the Summer Wells case. Also, in that case, you had a scenario of, in the Letecia Stauch case, Letecia saying that Ganon left home somewhere between 3:15 p.m. and 4 p.m. In other words, she kind of has like an almost hour-long hole in the middle of that afternoon, and then she only calls 911 3 hours after he apparently leaves. So essentially you've got, if you take it from 3 o'clock to almost 7 o'clock, it's 4 hours. A similar space of time in the Summer Wells case over the same kind of period. I mean, you don't really see some in the afternoon, and then there's a call kind of in the early-ish evening, right? Kind of a similar pattern. Is quite interesting. So in the going now to the actual case, the prosecution started quite strongly here. And, what is the most important evidence in the Gannon Stauch case? Well, the discovery of Gannon's body. That is really important evidence. There's other very important evidence as well in the Stauch home, but we'll get to that. So the first witness called was Jason Yoder, that's Yoder, not Yoda. Good to see you, Stephanie. He's a sergeant with the Major Crime Unit in Florida. He was on duty on March 17. So if you just compare it broadly, it took essentially a month and a half to find Gannon, even though a lot of effort was made to dispose of him, right? So it essentially took a month and a half to find him. And that is the danger of disposing of someone in a public space, is that exactly this can happen. Someone can stumble in a way that you couldn't predict, stumble across those remains. And that is exactly what happened. And so, it was sort of highway workers that were literally walking on the highway doing road maintenance that found the body inside a suitcase. The suitcase was actually emptied when law enforcement arrived by the people who called 911. And so what you have here, the defense have a possible case here for contamination. They could say the evidence inside that suitcase is not necessarily reliable, right? The body was found during a routine check by sort of road maintenance workers of the bridge. It's the Escambia River Bridge. So if you really want to figure out how far the body was moved, it was basically moved from Colorado Springs in Colorado to the Escambia River Bridge in Florida. I think it's like over 1,000 miles. That's quite a lot of effort. And so what is the main tool used here? Well, a vehicle, isn't it? A vehicle and a suitcase. Investigators determined at the scene that it was a boy based on the clothing, and they guessed that it was a boy between 9 and 14 years old, and it turned out to be a boy who was 11 years old. Now, something that I wrote about in the book Boy Interrupted that I thought was quite interesting in terms of the suitcase psychology. This case is still sub judice, if Letecia was involved, how did she come up with the idea of a suitcase? Now, if you think about the fabric of what was going on, what are the circumstances taking place at the time? Well, one of them was that her husband Al was on a trip, and she was going to be required to pick him up at the airport, and so she was going to theoretically disguise picking Al up from the airport with the disposal, right? And so what was done was, if you take the fact that you're going to pick someone from the airport, you're going to get their suitcase, right? The suitcase is going to be moved to the vehicle. So if you find a suitcase in the vehicle, you're not going to be like, wow, what's the suitcase doing in the vehicle? It's part of the fabric of that day. So, if you take the Chris Watts case, he hid his crime in the fabric of the average day going to work, right? Although it turned out that it wasn't such an average work day. In the Barry Morphew case, it was something similar, except it was going to work on a Sunday scenario. And so here you have something that appears to be trying to hide Gannon's disappearance within the fabric of travel. There's airplane parking. She left the Tiguan, in airplane parking overnight. She was picking someone up from the airport. They were hiring and returning a rental vehicle. As far as I know, I could be wrong on this, but as far as I know, the rental company that they used was based at the airport as well. And so in that scenario, if you find a suitcase in the vehicle, you're not going to be suspicious under those circumstances. According to Lauren Schaaf's tweet, Florida investigators called the sheriff once the autopsy was complete, and they saw a photo of Gannon, a national database. His body was fully clothed, and the blankets he was wrapped in were both soiled. I'm not quite sure what that means. Soiled with what? And he was in a fetal position. I suppose it could be soiled with fecal material, it could be soiled with bodily fluids, or both. But obviously, maybe it's quite difficult to determine when the suitcase has been out there, kind of out in the open, decomposing for, the suitcase with its contents have been degrading for a month. You can have mud and things there. It's going to be difficult to tell either way. But what I do think is quite interesting is you kind of have the laundry narrative that I've often spoken about, where you can often see that there's signs of mischief or foul play, where someone is doing laundry in the middle of a crime. And actually, it appears like you have something like that in the Summer Wells case. Now, in the Gannon Stauch case, I'm not quite sure if there's laundry, but there is cleaning up. We know that cleaning materials were bought in the middle of the thing. But something else, if you're looking for, if someone has gone missing, you also want to look at the clothing narrative. What clothes are missing? And then also in this particular case, there could also be a blankets narrative or a bedding narrative or even a container narrative. So in other words, if you apply this to the Summer Wells case, is one of Summer's blankets missing? Is bedding missing? Is a container missing from the property? And all of those can be used to transport a person. The bedding can be used as a kind of a shroud, and to contain the evidence that was there in the first place. If you think about the Chris Watts case, you have bedding that was used. And in this case, the bedding is also used. And it comes up, I think, in the afternoon session that they actually identify the bedding that Gannon had. You can actually see it in a photo in situ in a suitcase. That's how important that is. And that would be another important question to ask is, okay, so this is Gannon's bed. Is anything missing from the bed? Yes, well, a sheet. I wonder if that was established. Yeah, someone says also underwear and things like that. So if bedding is missing, it's a serious cause for suspicion. In the Stool case, bedding and a suitcase. In the Summer Wells case, are there any containers missing? Something to bear in mind. Okay, so this part is pretty heartbreaking. It appears that Gannon fought back. It appears that this wasn't just a sudden assault, a sudden quick assault. It was actually a long, drawn-out struggle. And I've already mentioned that it sort of brings to mind the Jodi Arias case, which is also pretty traumatic in a way. The unnecessary grotesqueries in that case. I'm just reading Lauren's tweet here. She says, according to Sergeant Yoder, there were at least 2 stab wounds. I'm not quite sure why they say that, because there were also like 18 sharp force wounds. So I'm not quite sure what the difference is. I guess the stab wounds are major wounds. They don't actually say where those wounds were. Then also a fractured skull and a gunshot wound to Gannon's lower left jaw. And he also had defense wounds to his hands. And the impression I get from some of the evidence I've seen was that a lot of the struggle took place in Gannon's bedroom, in fact, on his bed. And I'm not sure if now is the time to talk about how I think this played out, except that I think the gunshots happened right at the end. Similar to the Jodi Arias case, even though what was said in the Jody Harris case is different. I think the gunshot happened right at the end, and same in this case. The gunshot is basically the coup de grace. One of the things I examined when I wrote the book was I thought a gun was possible given that it's a military family, and they did find a gun in the house. In fact, in Letecia Stauch's room. I don't know whether Letecia Stauch's bedroom was the same as Elle's, but they did find a gun. I did think that was possible, but the neighbors didn't say they heard anything. But quite often, even in mass shootings, when there's kind of a crazy amount of gunshots going off, people sometimes mistake it for fireworks or popping noises. They don't always recognize what it is. There's also, in the suitcase is a pillow. So I wonder whether that may have been used to potentially try and muffle those noises. The thing I don't quite understand is, given the amount of injuries, did Ganon not cry out? And if he did cry out, why did no one hear him? I don't know to what extent the basement area where he stayed would have provided kind of soundproofing or anything like that. Also quite confusing, a projectile was recovered from Gannon Stauch's head, and 2 projectiles were found in a pillow. Now, the fact that 2 projectiles were found in a pillow does suggest this muffling using the pillow. It suggests that, we don't know for sure if that did happen. Also, it suggests that there were 2 gunshots, one possibly, we know in the lower jaw, and the other one maybe somewhere else. They found one projectile. Sorry, I thought they actually found a projectile inside his skull, but they didn't. They found he had a fractured skull. So I believe that you had a combination of, and I apologize for the graphic imagery when I say this, but I kind of see a physical contest, a struggle with some kind of sharp implement and possibly a blunt instrument, and then so you had almost, let's say, like a knife in the one hand and a bat or something else in the other, and so you had that kind of thing going on, that kind of contest going on, and then that was followed ultimately with the coup de grace, following that. This poor little boy was identified via dental records, and based on this idiosyncratic gap between his 2 front teeth, that's really how they ultimately identified him. It's quite sad. I mean, he's quite a beautiful little boy, and when you see him in March, all that's left is the sort of pulp, this mat that's unrecognizable. You can't even tell, really what is going on from a lively little boy to that. It's quite horrifying, isn't it? According to Lawrence Schaaf, there were 18 sharp force wounds, including those on the arms and his hands, which I think indicates defensive wounds. There's also, to me, an element of the Amanda Knox case here, not just an incident, but kind of a sense of a protracted tussle and kind of torture and a vindictiveness that's going on. It's not just something happens. It's quite a long, drawn out thing, which had to have been quite painful and unpleasant. So what I've written here is the 18 sharp force wounds indicate the length of the struggle and the scope of the struggle. It seems as if little Ganon was tortured, doesn't it? The other thing, and I think this reflects quite interestingly on the Summer Wells case, is that Letecia was actually arrested before the body was found. So if someone is involved in the Summer Wells case and you're thinking, well, no body, no crime, which is also what Patrick Frazee felt. Well, Letecia was arrested 2 weeks before the body was actually found. So it's not necessarily the case that if you don't have a body, you're not going to have charges. Also interesting is that the suitcase was likely concealed from view. It was kind of in a wooded section under the bridge. This is also quite interesting to bear in mind if you think if Summer Wells was disposed of somewhere, how did they actually find Gannon? Well, the suitcase was concealed from view in like a wooded area below the bridge, and no one would have found it if people didn't walk on that area, which I guess the person disposing wouldn't have imagined would have happened. I mean, it does seem quite unlikely. I do think it was the smell that gave away its location. Someone didn't see the suitcase immediately. I think they probably smelled it before, based on this highway crew that were there on foot. So a photo of the suitcase was provided in court under the Scambia River Bridge. It's once again one of those things where you really wish you were in court so you could see it. We've got to rely on someone who was there to get a description. They were trying to find out how hard was it to get to this location because of how busy the traffic was on the bridge. Thanks, Stephanie, for putting that out there. The suitcase was in the wooded area near the bridge, right? Something else that I think is quite interesting to point out, I wish I could show you, but I don't really have access to the computer I worked on when I wrote the book, but there were a lot of maps and things that I used. Bear in mind, in this case, Gannon was taken from, I think it was from his home to airport parking to a spot north of Colorado Springs, right next to the highway, and then from there to Florida. So you kind of had this sort of relay of disposal, right? But in terms of where Gannon was left north of Colorado Springs, it was kind of a ditch beside the road, and there was like a tree there and a kink in the road where you could see for a long way traffic that was approaching. And that kind of made sense from a couple of points of view. You could see if traffic was approaching, so you could quickly load something onto your vehicle. There was a place to park your vehicle off the verge, and you could locate the grave based on the tree that was there, right? Which was also going to give you a little bit of cover. The ditch would also give a certain amount of, because it was snowing at that time of the year, you would have visual cover, surface cover over the remains there. I think a question to ask is, in the Summer Wells case, how likely is it that, will the change of seasons make finding summer easier or harder? And I would actually hazard a guess that possibly if we go into winter, the cover that you get through a forest, all the leaves, if you remove that, it might actually strip away some of the covering that may be there. It's almost like melting snow, but in terms of the forest. Thanks, Grandma Green. Thanks for that. So that is assuming that Summer's outside somewhere. If that's not the case, then, if she's in part of a building or something, that's not really going to apply. Sergeant Yoder confirmed that the cause of death was a gunshot wound and blunt force trauma. So if you think about that, it's not really that specific. Is it blunt force trauma or a gunshot wound? And I think they did say somewhere that the gunshot wound would have been fatal itself. So it suggests there's blunt force trauma first and then the gunshot wound, right? That's why I say it feels a bit like the Jodi Arias case. The trauma and the torture and then the gunshot. Okay, so let's go on. So this is where it's confirmed. Sergeant Yoder said the autopsy showed that the gunshot wound was before or after. Oh, he didn't know whether it was before or after Gannon had died. And he said that would have been fatal by itself. The crack in the skull, Yoda didn't know if that was before or after his death either. So, well, I'm really feeling sleepy. This is kind of like way past my bedtime. What's really interesting in this case as well is car telematics. I've recently bought a vehicle as well, and what's coming out in all the modern vehicles, they come with a lot of chips, and there's telemetry, and in the same way that a cell phone can be tracked, cars can be tracked as well. And we've already seen in the Morphew case that when the doors open and close, that can be tracked. And so, a lot of cars come with their own GPS kind of thing. And so, thanks a lot, Half Rutter. Yeah, thanks. So car telematics are relevant in this case. Bear in mind, vehicles were used a lot in the Gannon Stauch case, around about 3 vehicles. We'll get to that in a moment. The same in the Barry Morphew case, meaning a vehicle was used in that case, but the car telematics are also important. Thanks, Raymond. The question is, will they play a role in the brand new Subaru in the Summer Wells case? It looks that way. I don't really know what technology those vehicles come with, but we'll see. But if you ask the question, what is the most critical tool used to dispose of Gannon's body? Well, a vehicle. And could a vehicle be relevant in the Summer Wells case? What do you guys think? Okay, so now we deal with the vehicles in some more detail. A map of Letecia Stauch's VW Tiguan car telematics on the morning of Tuesday, January 28th is shown. Now, bear in mind, that's the day after Gannon disappeared. Blue arrows show the directions she traveled. This is the day after Gannon was reported as a runaway. Now, bear in mind, there's a difference here. Letecia said that Gannon ran away. And in the Summer Wells case, she would never have wandered. Interesting that you have that difference. Thanks a lot, Stephanie. Stephanie, you've already contributed to PayPal, so I mean, I feel a little bit embarrassed, but I appreciate it. Thanks a lot. I should really show you Timmy, but he's completely... Timmy, come. Timmy. He's not even moving. Okay, so Letecia allegedly left her Tiguan at the airport and picked up a rental car, a white Kia Rio, and she searched for a cheap rental at around 7 a.m. Now, what I find quite interesting about this is when I wrote the book, there were certain things I didn't know that I speculated, and this is part of what is quite fascinating by where you get the actual information out. One of the things that I speculated was that from the roadside sermon that Letecia gave, I thought that she drove to that disposal site with the rental vehicle, and it does appear as if that happened. So I found that quite interesting. I'm not going to go through all of this here. I just not sure if I'm. So the GPS tracker on Letecia's aunt's rental. So that's quite interesting that a family member rented a vehicle that Letecia then used. It showed that the car went back to the area in Douglas County after an interview with a local TV station. The car was visible when Letecia was on camera. Now, what I'm trying to say is that happened immediately after that. I don't know whether what is being said here confirms that. I don't know why else you'd say the car went back to the area after an interview. Or, I'm saying immediately afterwards. It does sound like that is confirmed here. But one of the things that I think is quite strong in the book that I wrote is the timeline that I put together. Then Letecia's car and phone were taken into evidence. And then apparently the investigators put a GPS tracker on the rental car. And then they still struggle to find Gannon's remains, despite doing that. It just shows you. So this is dealing with the first disposal in the sort of Douglas County area, the area north of Colorado Springs. There's a part of the road that is an S curve. It's got quite a sudden kink in it. And apparently Letecia spent 6 minutes longer coming back through that curve the second time. So she drove through it, and when she came back, spent 6 minutes longer. If you think about it, it's actually a very short amount of time, but it was long enough to theoretically, if the prosecution are on the right track, to remove someone from the vehicle, put someone into the ditch, basically cover it over, get in the vehicle and drive away. You can imagine that taking 6 minutes. But the point is that it was a short period of time and no one found it, despite a lot of searching. Although they did find clues. They found a little bit of blood on a particle board and things like that. If I understand this correctly, Harley Hunt, her daughter, went with her mother to Florida. I didn't actually know that. But in a scenario like that, you would have had this suitcase in the vehicle, and one wonders how on earth they didn't smell anything. Compare it to the Casey Anthony case. Just think about how brazen that is. You're traveling with your one child while you've got another child in a suitcase. It's pretty crazy. And then they apparently stayed at the Candlewood Suites, and Gannon's body was actually dropped off near the Escambia River at around 4:15 a.m. on Tuesday, February 4th. So that's quite an interesting timestamp, very early in the morning, 4:15, and February the 4th. So quite early in this whole story. Basically a week after Gannon disappeared, so fairly early in the story. I must say I'm quite glad to see that the data so far has worked. I'm using mobile data instead of the local connection here. They did say that they don't believe that Harley is involved, which is good to know. And also that Al is definitely not involved based on what they've been able to find out. And also Gannon's biological mother. She's got quite a strange name. I think it's Lambiet, or not quite sure how to say her name, but they basically said that they are charging only Letecia. They see her as the only one involved here. And of course, she was the only one at the house that day, right? Sharon says, I'll never sleep well again. What is quite amazing with this case, it's kind of a bit of an echo. Landon. Not sure why I came up with that. Sorry, it is very late here. I'm not sure if I look as tired as I feel. You have a little bit of an echo here of the John Benet Ramsey case, which could have been solved immediately, like within the first hour, if I think it's Sergeant French or Officer French, if he'd just gone into the wine cellar, if he just checked that door and gone in, kind of thing. And in this case, the garage was dark. It's like the garage is dark. Well, why don't you turn the light on? You're investigating the scene, turn the light on, kind of thing. Sergeant Youngkin doesn't recall seeing a suitcase, but apparently on the body cam, you can actually see that there was a suitcase in the vehicle on January, I think the 27th. There was no indication that something violent had occurred. Well, that shows you how effectively, if you've got enough time, you can completely clean up a crime scene where there was a bloodbath. You can completely clean it up so that it's going to appear to an officer who's investigating, it's going to appear completely normal, right? And yeah, blood was found in the garage, yeah. So bear in mind, sometimes in a situation like that, blood that's a little bit not old can just appear to be a stain, could appear to be oil or something like that. So there was quite a lot of blood actually in this case, and somewhere in Lauren's coverage, he talks about there was a cement slab that looked completely normal, but when they sprayed Blue Star reagent on it, it just lit up. So it just shows you how you can get rid of evidence that is so that it's invisible to the eye. That is possible. People think if what you see, kind of like seeing is believing. If you see a crime scene and everything looks normal, well, nothing happened there. You've got to look for the detail, So this is kind of dealing with this. Sergeant Youngkin on January 29th. Bear in mind, this is 2 days later, so there's added opportunity over 2 days to clean the crime scene again. So during the search warrant, they discovered a red liquid substance on the garage floor and on the stairs in the garage. So even 2 days later, when they were looking even more carefully, they did find something, but they still weren't quite sure what it was. Then they called in a fourth witness. I think it's Lieutenant John Sarkissian. And he just spoke about all the resources they used. They used drones, four-wheelers, horses, prodding poles, canines, and even Parks and Wildlife came out to use sonar. And none of that really worked. Bear in mind, you move a body somewhere where if you move it again, well, it's not there. It's pointless searching there. They talk about some days there were 20 to 30 searches, other days over 100. I never really got the feeling that the search for Summer Wells ever came close to the scale of the searches for either Gannon or Suzanne Morphew. I don't know what you guys think. It just never seemed like there were that many. Hopefully it works. We'll see. Okay. Whew. Okay, sorry about that. I think maybe we can bring Timmy in here. Timmy, come. Come, boy. No, looks like he's not going to. Okay, so let's try and wrap up before the signal disappears again. So remember I said this reminds me a little bit of the Amanda Knox case. A photo is shown in court showing the Nike tennis shoes in a pile of clothes, and the bottom sole area of one shoe was swabbed and tested positive for blood and matched Gannon Stauch. And so what's kind of going on with that is it reveals obviously or potentially what thanks a lot, Becky, what Letecia was wearing at the time. And you have kind of a similar thing going on in the Amanda Knox case, where there are sorts of shoe prints and shoe sizes that are going on. Stephanie's talking about a pot roast in the oven. Okay. Edna Brown, yes, I think a car was involved, and I said that from the beginning to check the satellite chips. You're right. Dorothy Peterson, hi from Denmark. Okay, now compare the messiness of this crime scene to the absolute lack of blood evidence at 2825 Saratoga Trail, right? So you can't completely, if you're thinking about intertextuality, you can't completely match one crime scene to another. Criminals are completely different. So Chris Watts was incredibly fastidious, I think is the word, a guy who really cleaned up after himself. Not everyone does that, right? I think Letecia, if she did clean up the crime scene, I think she did quite a good job, but it's always a mistake shedding blood. That is always going to be very difficult to cover up. Then in terms of the corner carpet in Gannon's room was exposed to see if there was saturation. A stain went, and this gives you an idea of just how much, what kind of injuries that poor little boy sustained. You had blood that went right through the carpet, through the foam, and into the cement. I think they also showed, I think Gannon Stauch, his bed was removed that covered the stain. So it does seem like that was where this attack took place, in his bed, on his bed. Sergeant Hubble believes a trail of blood started in Gannon Stauch's bedroom, then went through the house to the garage. And then they showed a photo of a piece of the carpet on the floor in the garage, near the garage steps. And then they also found a little bit of blood on the lumber or the wood in the garage. I think part of what Al did as a hobby was woodworking or something. But I've always wondered that the chipboard that they found, what relation did that have? And was a piece of wood used as some kind of bludgeoning instrument? I know it's grisly to say, but what caused that blunt force trauma? So, was a piece of wood used to hit Gannon? And then, remember I spoke about the blanket narrative, the bedding narrative. Well, one of the last tweets that I read from Lauren was that the blanket covering Gannon in the photos off Letecia Stauch's phone matched the blanket found in Florida. I think it had patterns of sharks on it or something like that. And so one question I don't know if the authorities asked, especially before Gannon was found, but it's like in this photo of Gannon with the bedding, where are these blankets that you see in the photo? Was that ever established? It's one thing to match them post-mortem, but what about before, kind of thing? Printed bedding. Okay, let me look at Julie says, I've only watched that video once. You know, you're watching the beginning. Yeah, very dark. Is she speaking in court? Well, Lauren Schaaf's attending the preliminary hearing. Letecia's not, she's not watching it, or she's not sort of appearing, as far as I know. There was a sort of a wedge under the blankets in the photo, yeah. But, you know, what's quite interesting with that photo of Gannon is you can compare it in a weird way to the last photo of Summer Wells. There you have Gannon sleeping, and I think he was actually alive, but, you know, once again, you could say, why is the last photo of Gannon not a boy smiling, laughing, fine, right? Why is he sleeping, kind of thing? Okay, so that's it. I'm not really going to take it any further than that. If you are interested in my research before this came out, you can check out Boy Interrupted, The Murder of Gannon Stauch. It's available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited. I do know that when I wrote that book, I was thinking of writing a follow-up based on the trial, and we're not quite there yet. We'll see if this case does go to trial, but we'll see. I'm not sure what else I can tell you guys in terms of the Summer Wells case. Not much is happening besides, I think, charges have been filed in Utah, so we'll see what happens there. Dodo Dixon, thanks Mods, and thanks Nick, thanks a lot. Something else to look out for on, I think, the 17th, so about 8 days from now, the Morphew case will sort of be decided whether there's sufficient cause for the case to go to trial, and I did do a video on that, and like on the 10 most damning pieces of evidence, and then it's possible that the affidavit may come out in the Morphew case. If that happens, I'll probably be back at work covering that, just because I think that is quite important. Diane Harlow says, I have to go and buy your book now. I would love a signed copy. Signed copies might be a bit difficult at this point. Leonie Duploy, Letecia changed her story so many times. Can't believe she thought she would get away with it. Kisses for Timmy. I wish I could show you Timmy, but he looks like I feel. Like I really wish I was sleeping right now. I'm really, really tired. I think part of what's happening is, when you go to the coast after you're there a few days, that the sea level thing hits you, the altitude thing hits you. Nick, have you seen the pictures of Summer on the Missing But Not Forgotten channel? No, I'm not sure. I don't think I have. Okay, I'm not going to be on for more than an hour. I'm sorry about the 4 or 5 minutes of buffering, but I've now put it on to Wi-Fi. Amazingly enough, it seems to be working. So, what else can I tell you? To me, there's been a murder where I am. And Timmy is the main suspect, and I'll be telling you guys about that. If it sounds like it's a joke, or it sounds like it's funny, it's actually not. It's quite unfortunate. But there has been a murder of a rooster, and Timmy's the main suspect. And I might be live on Saturday morning my time. That is, I think it's 5 p.m. Eastern time, your time. Sorry, I've got that the wrong way around. It's 5 p.m. my time. It's 10 a.m. Eastern time, your time. Sorry, I am definitely a bit tired. But I'll talk to you guys a little bit about that, and also about bias. Like obviously it's my dog and I love my dog and I don't think he can do any wrong, but not necessarily. Yes, 10 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. So I'm also going to talk to you a little bit about the Summer Wells case and what a genuine and authentic missing person case looks like where someone wanders off. So just go through that quite briefly. The rooster probably attacked Timmy. No, I don't think so. The rooster had it coming. No, I don't think so. So yeah, I'll talk to you guys a little bit about that. But in terms of thinking about true crime, it's quite interesting because it's got a lot of the same elements: motive, time, opportunity, and then also, obviously I want to defend Timmy, but and also evidence. There was no blood, there was no feathers, there was no sound, and so how does one investigate that? But also, how do you investigate it in terms of bias? Are you going into it to defend Timmy, or are you going into it to try and find out what happened? It's quite interesting. One of the ways that you're a good investigator is you willing to be wrong and you willing to acknowledge if you are wrong. If you can't do that, then you are always going to have bias, right? So, it's kind of easier to do it when it's something like a dog, where you obviously do have a bias, but it's also a little bit different to dealing with a person. So it's kind of a thought experiment in that sense, but I think it's also quite a valuable one. How old is Timmy? He's a year and a half. Has he chased a large bird before? He chases them all the time, but they always fly off. He's never actually caught one. Actually I think I have seen him catch a small pigeon once. So I have actually seen that. But I'll talk to you guys about the details of this murder and Timmy being the prime suspect, and what likely happened here and so on. So we'll go into that. Timmy innocent until proven guilty. Okay. He objects. I don't know if you just heard him sighing there. Okay, guys, so I think we've just passed the hour mark. I'm quite grateful that I managed to get this live done, just because the internet can be a little bit dodgy. When I see you guys on Saturday, it'll be daytime, and so you'll be able to see the view, which is quite nice. But thank you for joining me. I actually wanted to show the log fire, but it didn't quite get itself going. Roosters are mean. Okay. Thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone, for making it. Let's see if I can get one more like so we can get to 300. There we go. Thanks a lot for that. Okay, guys, take care. Wherever you are, stay safe, and I'll see you guys next time. Ciao.